Moses Siregar the third.
Hey Moses, how did you get into astrology?
Well, Mom, who's just around the corner over here, she got me started, and she had me reading Liz Green's kids' books on astrology when I was in probably first grade, doing science fair projects on the solar system, and then it kind of went dormant for a while, and I wasn't into it. I thought she was crazy when I was in high school. She was still into astrology, and then she told me some stuff about my chart one night, and I said, "How do you know that? What is this?" So I was able to read her books, Isabel Hickey and Stephen Arroyo and Liz Green and Dan Rudier, and read off charts of all my friends and family, and I found out, wow, this stuff is pretty darn amazing. How did that happen? And then I was off. I couldn't put it down after that.
So in first grade, were you doing people's charts?
Practically, yeah. I actually found this book when I was about 25 in my basement, and it was Looking at Astrology by Liz Green. Really pretty book, and I opened it up, and all the kids in my first grade class, their names were written down in pencil, and their sun signs were next to their names, and I couldn't believe it. I was floored, but I could remember all the kids. I could say, oh yeah, that kid was a Scorpio, or whatever it was,
So how has astrology impacted your life, both personally and as a career?
More than I could even possibly start to tell you. It's part of how I understand how the universe works, and it tells me how I work and how my friends work and how my relationships work with them, and a lot of what's going to happen in my life, what's going to happen when I go to different places, what's going to happen, as I go through these different seasons in my soul, and just it's such a great insight.
What's your focus in astrology? What type of astrologer are you?
Well, I started with Western astrology, and I picked up Vedic astrology. I like both systems a lot. More modern astrology, more traditional Vedic astrology, and some of the traditional Western too, but my focus now is really with locational astrology, and that's my main passion. That's what I mainly help people with these days, is finding better places to live, and that's really, it's great because it's so empirical. You can really test it. You can find out if it's true. You can find out what happened when you lived here, or what happened when you lived here, and if you're either accurate or you're not, if you are trying to read those influences. So it's neat to have something that is really grounded in some kind of reality.
Could you talk about the basic principle or idea of what astrocartography is, and to someone who knows nothing?
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to do it, but the main principle is, one of the basic concepts is, was there a planet rising or setting in any given place on the Earth when you were born? When you came on the Earth, maybe the sun was rising in Tokyo. Maybe Jupiter was culminating, reaching its highest point, as it travels across the ecliptic. And that's symbolic of what that place is about for you. Now, from there, we can get much, much, much more complicated, but it's basically this idea that as we enter the Earth, this sort of grid or matrix is set up that determines what our experiences will be like everywhere we go, and you can test it, you can verify it, and that's why it's so popular with people. To me, it's the most accurate form of astrology there is.
What fascinates you most about astrology, and how would you define astrology?
What probably fascinates me the most is the fact that so many different applications of astrology can all seem to be true, even using similar but different rules. And I love getting into each little worldview. Each astrological person develops their own intimate communication with astrology and understanding of astrology. So the two people may have a different understanding using similar principles, some of them the same, some of them different, and yet each one, once you spend time developing it, gives you this incredible window into astrology and how it works.
And how would you define astrology?
I would define astrology as simply this attempt to study celestial phenomenon and correlate those principles, those forms, those archetypes to human lives, and studying it in all sorts of manifestations, relationships and locations and life cycles and personalities and you name it. It just keeps on going and going and going.
Excellent. Do you have any famous charts that you like?
Famous people's charts?
Yeah.
Well, I have a sort of a guru or a spiritual master named Amachi, and she's known around the world as one of the greatest humanitarians alive, has donated tens of millions of dollars to charities and started free hospitals, taken over orphanages, and done all kinds of great things. So she's about as close to a Christ-like figure as I would imagine is walking the earth right now. And her birth date is available, so it's neat to be able to have her chart and look at it. Her Vedic chart, really, she's from India, of course, but her Vedic chart really seems to explain a lot of why she is how she is.
How do you prepare for a session, astrological session, and could you give any advice to someone who's new to astrology who You're still trying to get over that initial nervousness of working with clients?
Yeah, I like to try to meditate on the charts for a while. Essentially, that means looking at them, thinking about them, letting my mind take in the information, but also start to let some kind of intuition happen, some kind of information that comes from just beyond your rational mind as well. So it's all a process of just studying it. Now, I think for people that are getting into it, once you know enough, most people just need to start talking to people about charts. They need to start talking to people and seeing that it flows. Once you get there, you think you don't know enough. You think you don't know enough to talk to clients, but you start having a dialogue with them, and you start revealing things. And I always recommend some kind of prayer or meditation to center yourself before and ask for guidance, and that really seems to make a big difference, I think.
And how do you prepare for a session on the technological side? Or the technical side?
Of like what kind of techniques would I be looking at?
Yeah, and printouts, and what do you do?
Okay. Yeah, I usually, like for a normal reading, not location reading, but just someone looking at their life and what's going on, I'll look at their natal chart with their Western chart, modern Western chart, using porphyry houses and their Vedic chart, and I'll look at the transits to the natal chart, transits to the progress chart. This is the secondary progress chart. Look at the secondary progress chart. Often look at the solar arcs to the natal chart. Sometimes the solar return to the relocated location. The Vedic dashas, sometimes a few Vedic dashas. Also look at where they're living. How does the relocated chart affect their life currently? And those are some of the main things I look at.
You've been one of the astrologers who successfully have blended Vedic and Western without really smashing them together. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's neat to let them be independent, and it's neat to bring them together in some ways too. And in some ways you can bring them together, and in some ways you want to keep them separate. But the hardest thing was learning how to think anew. Like once you have a bias, you're like learning a new language, but you're still trying to use some of the same rules of syntax and grammar that you learned in your first language. And to some extent, you have to try to wipe your mind clean and learn it anew. And that's very, very challenging. But it takes some time. Once you get used to it, you start hanging out with enough people who think Vedically. It's good to hang out. Let's say you start with Western. Then you hang out with people who just do Vedic astrology, and you start to see how they think independent of what you already knew in Western astrology. It takes time, but after a while, it's a really rewarding and I think very valuable, very useful thing to be able to work with both.
So tell us about your involvement with the astrological community. We have all these great characters that are even beyond astrologers. They have musicians, artists, all these people. Can you talk about your involvement with them?
Yeah, it's a great community of people, and I'm really community-oriented by nature. I have some Indonesian ancestry, and apparently those are often very communal-oriented people, so I'm a little bit unusual in the sense that I'm always trying to bring people together, always trying to empower people, always trying to support other people that I think are doing good work, and I really come from this kind of mindset that, the more I have, or the more everyone else has, the more I have, the more I have, the more everyone else has, and so I think that's one of the reasons I've been able to organize some things in astrology is because I want to see everyone succeed. I mean, not just one of us can succeed and make astrology, have the impact that it should have in the world. So we all need to be promoting, each other and recognizing where other people's gifts are and, honoring those gifts. So I love working with other astrologers. I like working independently too, but I like working independently to promote other astrologers and work with people when I have a good relationship with them, a good commonality with them.
Now, this new conference, the Blast Astrology Conference, which some are calling the Woodstock of Astrology, and I was there filming it, so I agree. Can you just talk about what inspired you to create that and how it went?
Yeah, I got the inspiration one day, and I think I got to a point where I realized I knew enough people who were incredible astrologers that weren't going to get chances to speak at some of the bigger conferences, at least not as much as they deserved to, because the way those things work is, after a while, it's a bit of a buddy system. A lot of those people have been hanging out with each other for decades and decades, and so it's just a thing about human nature. After a while, you just start inviting the same people because you've known them for 30 years, and it's hard to make room for those new people to come in. So I decided I could put together enough people to headline a conference, and people may not have ever heard of them, but once they come and hear them speak, they'll find out how incredible their knowledge is and what good astrologers they are, and that's what happens. People were pretty well blown away by the information that we put together. So I just said, you know what, somebody needed to do it. And I was sort of waiting for a while for someone else to do it. And no one did it. So I said one day, okay, fine, I'm going to do it then. And I just used my, ability to connect to a few different organizations and people in the community to help me promote the event. And we got a lot of support, and it was a huge success. I mean, we got a lot of new information out there together, and we launched a lot of careers. We gave a lot of people a lot of opportunity to make their mark in the astrological community. Now I thought it was going to be maybe a one-shot deal, but now we started a monster, so we got to keep this baby going. But it's a good monster because, you know, this is part of where astrology is going. These people represent where astrology is going. We've got to help them get their ideas out, get their ideas out in books, get it in audio, get it in video, encourage more events, encourage more communication, and you know, we've got something incredible here. I mean, this is really special, so we need to keep it growing, keep it going, and find out how can we keep empowering this next generation of astrologers, because we're coming together at a time where we've got Vedic and Western and all kinds of different Western astrologies and traditional astrologies and locational astrologies and horary astrologies, and everything is coming together. And this is a generation that can really gain a mastery in some of these areas and combine them in a way that is more creative and more powerful, more impactful than anyone's ever done before. So I love it. I love being able to be a part of this new movement.
And I think it's going to be pretty amazing because there's going to be a lot of lectures giving a lot of cutting-edge information. I think these are ideas that are going to shape the future of astrology very literally, and you're here for that. So you're lucky, I believe, to be here and receive all this wisdom. So, you know, congratulations to you too for making it.
Can you talk about the impact that Sedona, the spiritual vibe of Sedona, had on the conference?
It really had a huge impact, I think. People just loved the environment. I mean, they were so happy just to be at a conference where it wasn't a giant corporate hotel, and we were surrounded by these incredible red rocks, as I'm sure your movie's going to show people. And the energy there is very special. I think for me, Sedona is about these heightened experiences of synchronicity. You go to Sedona and you meet someone in 10 minutes that you needed to meet and learn something you needed to meet. Everything is sort of heightened there, and it's just beautiful. It's just unbelievable. So it made the astrology, which is already sacred, it put it in the right environment to match the sacredness of what we're actually doing. So I think that was a huge success having it there.
Can you talk about the difference between a normal astrology conference that has 10 tracks and the Blast, which had everything in one beautiful community room?
Yeah, that was another big thing that we heard from people, was that they loved being together as a community, and they loved, you know, not having to run around between 10 different lectures. I loved it as well, and I think that creates a community feeling, because at least for this conference, there wasn't a feeling of competition of, oh, I hope this person comes to my lecture and doesn't go to that guy's lecture, and that kind of thing. We all get in our egos when we get split up too much. Now in the future, we probably won't be able to keep everyone together if we have a lot more people. We had about 225 people, probably a little more than that. But in the future, if we have a lot more, we'll probably get to split up in at least 2 big rooms or something like that, and hopefully keep that same kind of spirit together in that sense. But we want to keep it sacred and keep it in a beautiful environment. And you know, that's part of maybe what this generation has to offer too. Let's experience astrology in a different environment than we've experienced it in before.
Are you planning any books in the future?
Well, I'm starting to think about, first of all, publishing a book of the Blast, the first Blast conference, and all the presentations that were made there, and maybe some additional articles from the people who presented there. That this is a book that needs to be, you know, this is a history that needs to be preserved, and people will want to own that history and want to read that history and be informed by it. So now I realize, you know, I thought maybe I could get done with this and go back to just having my own simple little life, but now I realize, hey, we've got a lot that we have to share. So now I feel like maybe we'll put this together in a book form, and then from there we'll see what I do for myself too. You know, who knows?
Can you talk about your online website where you have the course?
Yeah, I have my own personal website, astrologyforthesoul.com. The Blast is theblastastrologyconference.com. And my own website, I have kind of a free course, Learning Astrology, a lot of, I think, good insights into modern astrology. And there were things that I put together probably 10 years ago, and they've been on the website for a while now. And that's been a nice way to reach out. I like to give things away for free whenever I can, because I feel like, you know, the more you give, the more you have, and the more we know, the better off the planet is, better off each of us are. So whenever we can, we try to be generous. I try to be generous with the conference and everything else we can do.
Spiritual path. Astrology does indicate to me that there's an infinite sort of intelligence, a cosmic intelligence, sticking people in bodies. And can you talk about your approach to the spiritual path, and like, how do you approach that?
Yeah, I have a bachelor's degree in religion, and I've personally been immersed in almost every major religious tradition that there is in one way or another. So that was part of my, you know, traditional background, education, is to learn about how different people think religiously, and to bring that into a session so that if it works for someone, you know, if I work with a Buddhist, I know how to speak a Buddhist language. If I work with a Muslim, I know how to speak a Muslim language. Because I don't think you can understand astrology really without some kind of spiritual viewpoint on it. I mean, there are things like the 12th house. There are things like the outer planets. I mean, we can try to make these things just mean something very, very dense and concrete and small, but they really, to understand them, they have another level, which is spiritual. I mean, it really is. So if I don't address that level with someone, then I'm not really helping them fully. I'm not really showing them that this transit isn't just about the fact that your car broke down. It's also about something that is deeper and more meaningful than that. So I always try to adapt to each person and put astrology in a spiritual context, but respectfully towards the person's own beliefs, so that I'm not pushing my own beliefs on them. But ultimately, you know, without a spiritual element to astrology, I think it's pretty flat. I think it's pretty empty.
Is there anything else I should ask you that I don't know to ask you? Anything you want to say that's really passionate about it? Anything?
Yeah, my part of my mission right now, personally, with my own work, is about locational astrology, and a lot of astrologers know about this, but we don't know enough about it. We're not educated enough about it to use it, and use it very skillfully. And so once people start to realize that what you experience will be indicated by the astrology of where you happen to move or live, then it starts to really interact with your consciousness, where you realize, okay, well, if I'm here, here's what I have to contend with. Here's the energies that I have to work with, both positive and negative. And Jim Lewis and many other people have really put this astrology out there in recent times. But there's still more for us to go, because astrologers are still a little hesitant about it. They include it, but it's a little bit on the periphery. I think it needs to become more of an integral part of how we do astrology. It is a new paradigm of how to do astrology. But it's so accurate, and people respond to it because it's so accurate. And part of my mission is to make sure that we educate ourselves about how to use that information and use that to better our lives and everyone else's lives. Because if you think about it, if everyone in the country was in their best spot, that means everyone's having a good time. If everyone in the country is having a good time, the world's going to be a better place, because we're going to have so much more creativity, so much more love, so much more awareness of our environment. So, you know, we got to get in the right spots and make sure we're happy, and then from there we can do a whole lot more.
What would you say to the young aspiring astrologer who, thinking astrology was just sun signs, comes across this video and now wants to get their chart done or wants to start studying astrology? They're fascinated. Well, where do they start?
You know, dig in. Just find someone that you resonate with. Find a book you resonate with. Start reading. Start visiting websites, and go for it. You know, just keep digging, and eventually you're gonna hit gold. You're gonna hit water. You're gonna hit everything that you're looking for. But you just got to keep nurturing that. Keep watering that plant.
Do you have a sort of your own way of describing the interaction between the planets, signs, houses, and aspects?
Nothing that is probably terribly interesting or you know, different than what someone else might say, I would say.
Mm-hmm. How do you describe the planets in terms of their archetypal forces and all?
Well, you know, each planet represents there's so many levels. I mean, psychologically, my first hit is psychological, that it represents an energy within ourselves that we have to be in contact with. You know, they could be looked at as gods in a way, whether it's literal or symbolic or however you want to say it. But these are all forces that we need to make peace with and be integrated with. And a lot of what astrology is about for me is learning how to own all of yourself, all of your chart and every planet in it and everything that's going on in that chart. And the people that really do that, when they own all their combinations, all their aspects, everything in the chart, their lives are full. Instead of getting into hard relationships that are mainly for the purpose of making you aware of what planets you're not in touch with symbolically, you get to be creative, you get to be full of life, you get to do other things. So most people live their lives trying to integrate the fact that, you know, their moon and Venus are square in their chart, and they have a hard time since their mother created this pattern for them that was difficult, and they play it out in their relationships with women throughout their lives. Most people spend most of their energy trying to work out these fundamental conflicts, and if we could just understand them and embody them and realize it doesn't have to be either or, I can make this moon happy, I can make this Venus happy, then suddenly we're not spending our lives in conflict with other people, and we've learned those lessons. So you got to learn those astrological lessons, then you can graduate and go on to something better. And that's being integrated, being whole, and having good relationships, and having a happy life, and having a creative, fulfilling destiny, and contribution and right livelihood. So it's been an immense tool for me to achieve that sort of aim in my life.
One last question. Could you describe to someone that knows nothing about astrology what synastry is about?
Yeah, I love working with synastry. You know, it's the archetypal dynamic that you experience with another person. And so there's a number of archetypal dynamics you'll experience with people. Maybe you have Mars square Mars, and there's this element of your relationship that's always a little testy and fiery. Maybe it's a little bit conflictual and aggressive. Maybe it's just very passionate. But there's all these different dimensions. And so once you study the synastry, maybe you get to 5 basic patterns in the chart. And those patterns keep repeating over and over and over in the relationship, and you keep jumping from one to the next. Well, it's good to understand what those are, because maybe it's too much, and maybe you got to say, okay, this is too much, or maybe you find the ones that are difficult and you communicate about it, you understand it, you find a way to work with it, you find a way to make it better, or you find out, hey, this is all the blessings we have. Let's be thankful for that, and let's make the most of it. But it's so helpful, and you know, personally, I think a lot of people get stuck in relationships that are too difficult for themselves. And maybe if astrology raised our awareness of what we really want to have, then you know, maybe there'd be more happy people, more happy relationships in the world too.
All right.
And this is in Prescott here. This is Thumb Butte, and they used to call it Lion Head or Lion Point or something like that. But from the other end, it looks like a thumb. But here I am. My house is just sort of around the corner there. But my wife and I are both Leos. We're both living by this earthy lion here. You know, we both have these earthy Leo charts. So.
Perfect.
I can make it happen, and I'll be darned, Moses is a miracle worker.
You're going to get a lot of information from different schools here. And at this next event, we want to have more in depth, where if you like, you know, maybe you get introduced to Vedic astrology here, and you can take a 1 or 2 day intensive on Vedic astrology there. So it'll be more of an apprenticeship, and Saturn will be in Virgo in the tropical zodiac at that point. So it'll be more of an apprenticeship, more in depth. So if you get introduced to something here, next time hopefully you can go more in depth and really study with someone, you know, particularly for that. It just seems like we've brought through so much information that needed to be brought through, and I don't know, I thought that these ideas that we're seeding during this whole weekend were going to become important ideas, and we're going to continue to develop these ideas and take them further. And I feel like, you know, it's really, yeah, it's amazing to think that part of what we're doing here is part of the next, you know, next movement of astrology. And I think that Pisces nature of what we're doing is we dissolved, like Maurice Fernandez talked about, we dissolved the boundaries, you know, between a lot of these types of astrology, so that you all got a glimpse into these various windows that are all very powerful and very exact and very, very interesting. And maybe this next generation, you know, or this next 15 years of this Uranus North Node cycle can be about, you know, appreciating all these different approaches and taking them to their depth without being in conflict with each other and getting in our, you know, egoic state of it has to be this way or that way, and continue to open our hearts to different types of astrology and focus on the fact that we want to help people with astrology, and we want to make it relevant to our lives and not get so caught up in all the minutiae. And that Pisces side of it maybe is how can we, you know, make it heart-centered and realize that it's this very dreamlike, incredible gift from wherever gifts come from in the universe, and we're lucky to be tapped into it. So, you know, this weekend has just been so affirming for me of astrology and this community and everything we can do together and where we can go together. And gosh, I'm so blessed and happy and so thankful that all of you have been so positive and kind, and, you know, hope we can, you know, keep this going somehow. And those are some of the things that my heart wanted to say right now, so thank you again.
If I may say, this was a far superior to our conference. And I've been to a lot of them.